we thank you. We call on Mazito Chukwuezoke, please. Njenje Media, what's your question, sir? You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Prince there. You know, sitting down here for the last almost an hour listening to you with a great insight, it's in as much as I appreciate what all you said, but it leaves me scratching my head even when I have no hair to think that there appears to be no solution in sight. But I need to be optimistic in some senses. So I will ask the following question. Do you think that in solving the issues of Boko Haram, that the help would come from the northern elders, or rather the northern leaders, or that it will be a military approach, or that will be maybe, as they say, the joint multinational approach? That's one. On the second one, you gave a narration of how these Boko Haram started. This again, as someone from the Southeast, I would want to say, do you see any semblance? Do you see any liken to what we have today emanating from the Southeast? Thank you.
All right, thank you so very much. I think I would like to answer your question from the last one. And it's a fearful yes. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, because sadly, we often say history repeating itself. We can see all the lines. We can see all the lines that they're falling in wrong places, but that's what it is. Everything happening in Owerri, for example, in parts of Abia, bear the trademark of Boko Haram. Let me tell you, let me give you this insight. I remember sitting in a meeting of the Guild of Editors, and we had this extensive 1 hour plus debate on not using the term unknown gunmen. That was some 11 years ago. I didn't know that, put it to 2020, 2021, we'll start using that term all over again. So who's the unknown gunman? At that point, it was Boko Haram versus unknown gunmen. So most of our reports were trying to get the divide. When did Boko Haram strike, and when was it the unknown gunmen that were striking? Churches were initially mosques were the targets. When they were done with the mosque, churches became the targets. When they were done with churches, influential people across divide, let me give you an example. They walk into a village or a community or a local government, they burn some of the houses, and then they keep the choice houses and they move into that house and they occupy it. That was the modus operandi. Custom officers, immigration officers were targeted. Now, when you look at what's happening in the Southeast, it's almost the same thing. Because if I were to say, my dear brother, hair or no hair, you probably will scratch some more. Where is the funding for the same group that's terrorizing the Southeast coming from? And then what's happening to the elders in the Southeast? In the early days of Boko Haram, there was, sadly so, because of our ethno-religious setting, there was a blame game. Don't forget that at some point, the narrative was about how the Muslim population was being targeted. It was a Jonathan creation. It was to get, and at that point, there was a graveyard dead silence of groups like the Borno Elders Forum, of Arewa as an institution and as a strong group. And the oligarchy, which is more today on paper, and I say that there's an illusion that there's a northern oligarchy. It doesn't exist anymore. What you have is fragments of it. Now that leads me to touching that very sore point. Please don't lose hope, even though I think I have also lost hope. There is no military solution, because the truth of it is that the military as presently constituted cannot tackle it. Now, permit me to take a footnote from my military conversation. My dear brother, How is military recruitment done? Most of the officers we have are officers who got into the military through the elitism and class system of the Nigerian army. Not prepared for any of what is happening, which is semi-jungle warfare in Boko Haram territories. They're not ready for it. They cannot face it. On the flip side, sad as it may be, there is a lot of funding coming in from cross-purpose ends. Take this to the bank. For example, there is an inflow of cash from the Mali axis vis-a-vis back into Nigeria, then back to Mali. When you say, can the military help? I now ask the question, how does the central bank, for example, our banking system help? How do Boko Haram get military hardware, military software, intercept radio messages? How? And then if you talk about the multinational or the international conversation, we now have to sit down to look at politics that's larger than what we're talking about here. Question is, the caliber of people we've put in leadership, do they want to have this conversation? Do they even have the intellectual power to have this conversation? If you have people at the National Assembly who will sit down and churn out a conversation that says, if you are kidnapped and you pay a ransom, you go to jail for 15 years.
That's stupid, isn't it?
It just tells you, I mean, what's that guy, what's he high on?
What are they doing at the National Assembly? Are they all dumbheads or what?
That just makes you wonder. So for you to now have an intellectual conversation that you're moving from a purely theoretical framework to say this is what can be done on ground. The question, okay. My friend who asked the question, let me tell you of an experience. Elomba, don't laugh. For 2 years, for the first 2 years we worked in Boko Haram, I would talk to the military attaché who believed for all intent and purpose I was American. Did you hear that?
That you're an American in what sense?
Because I didn't have an indigenous name, because I didn't have an accent, so that gave me a lot of luxury in terms of information, in terms of access. Maybe let me put this in context. Have you ever seen an NTA report on Boko Haram? Has NTA Bornu covered any story on Chibok?
That's a good. I don't live in Nigeria. Those in Nigeria will be able to tell us whether NTA has covered any of these reports. I don't know.
So my dear brother Njenje Media, I feel your pain. I'm situated in that pain that we don't see. People talk about a light at the end of the tunnel. We don't even know how long this tunnel is. So trying to look for lights is pretty a tough call.
All right, my brother, I don't know how many questions. There are so many hands. I don't know how much question you can take. If you allow me, I'll continue calling them. Abubakar I, please. You raised up your hand. What question do you want to ask? Abubakar I, Dudsa, please. If you are still there.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yeah, I'm Prince Charles, longest time. How are you? I haven't seen you in a long time.
Very well.
We've lost contact.
Well done,
Yeah,
sir.
how are you?
That's true.
Yeah. My question is this collaboration that we have among African nations like the Chad, Cameroon, is it that the countries are not really committed to ending this menace that has been affecting us for over a decade? Because at the time you heard that there is a joint multi what do you call it? Joint task force. Multinational joint task force. Yeah, at the time we'll be happy that they've come together to fight it, and then all of a sudden you hear stories that some are backing out. So is it that, why is the result really, is it not affecting us in all space, like the economic sphere, the political sphere? Is it really not affecting the nations as it is affecting Nigeria, because it's quite sad that at the time we'll be happy, we'll be hopeful that it's coming to an end. Then you hear stories that some are pulling out, there is some sabotage here and there. That's just my one comment.
Haji Abubakar, let me answer it in this manner, using that proverbial phrase that says, where logic ends, Congo begins. I think where logic ends, Nigeria seems to begin these days. I smile when I go through reviews of the paper and conversations around political circles and military circles. If you notice, with the death of Idris Deby, you would strangely want to think that Chad has been protecting Nigeria, you know, with the kind of conversations that have been going around, how he's the one holding fort around those circles. And it's not far-fetched. We might talk about it in terms of the civil society world, the donor agency, politics, and sphere. The truth of the matter is that over these years, Boko Haram, the Northeast, has also evolved a market of what we call developmental politics, where so much money is involved. So what is weighed on a scale is the business of insurgency and the business of peace, which weighs more, which is more profitable. So we have emerging conflictopreneurs. Let me shock you, and I know if there's a third eye here for the military, they would quickly deny. At some point, people were paying to have themselves posted to Maiduguri at the same time when people were like running away from there. And you ask yourself, why would anybody want to pay to want to be posted there? Only a couple of months ago, cash meant for soldiers was waylaid by Boko Haram. Nobody was held. Now, permit me to look at this architectural framework and ask my question, which I know the answer. Till date, one of the things we've talked about is the justice system around Boko Haram itself. Is there a justice system around Boko Haram? What happens to those away from de-radicalization? There is none. So the entire structure itself is one that lends credence to all sorts of corrupt practices, to all sorts of looping and empty questions with no answers. So, Elumba, let me tell you this and our audience. Nobody, which is very strange, nobody, and I challenge anybody to provide the terms, the MOU for the multinational away from what was agreed in Paris a few years ago. And it was dead on arrival. It was dead on arrival. I don't want to open a cans of worms. For some of us, don't mention me, I will deny everybody here, that went to Chad when there was a purported arrangement. I remember Nigeria paid for, I'll take another question.
Dr. Wankomo Ezigwe, please. Are you able to ask a question at this point? Can you unmute yourself?
Sorry, let me just make some few comments. Because he did a very nice job. But I can see that he concentrated more on southern Borno side, mainly southern Borno. I've done some work around the Lake Chad region and on Cameroonian side, from Malta to Gamburu. And I just want to make some clarification. First, there was a question you asked him, he didn't explain it more, the relationship between Borno, Kanuri, and the Fulani. And let me just add that Yobe State acts as the meeting point of the Borno Empire and the Sokoto Caliphate. And in Yobe State today, after the Kanuri, you have the Fulani as the second largest ethnic group. And also be aware that both Borno and Yobe are multi-ethnic states. Borno has more than 20 ethnic groups, the same thing with Yobe. But oftentimes we cover them as Kanuri. And that, he was talking about fishing as the main. We talked about this issue when we talked about the death of and the role of Chad. The Chad zone is mainly dominated by the Shua Arabs and the Buduma. And the greater part of Lake Chad belong to Chad Republic. And most of the fish we have actually came from there. Let us be very, very clear. The people who original sponsorship of the Boko Haram were the northern governors. There was a time Boko Haram threatened them, and they had to pay Boko Haram ransom. It was clear. And it is also obvious that the federal government wants the Boko Haram to be sustained as a way of creating a state of instability in the country. Because the only way they can maintain the present authority is to create a state of instability that will also give them leeway to rig elections. For example, I walked among the Shua Arabs, I walked among the Cameroonian soldiers fighting Boko Haram in Malta. From Malta, I entered Gamboru. I walked against Gamboru has the largest refugee camp of displaced people, both Cameroon and Nigeria. And I walked among the refugees there. And we also have a big military camp there. The soldiers don't go to war. They just send a small party with few pickup vans to go scouting. And you see Boko Haram finishing them. So the major point that we have to be very, very specific. Chad and the federal government are in cooperation to make sure that Boko Haram is sustained. Because the sustenance of Boko Haram also makes their hold in power very, very effective. And the idea of not being divided, no. Now they are one, so long as it has to do with the hold onto power. So military, the only military option to the solution of Boko Haram is counter-insurgency. And what I mean by counter-insurgency, you need another set of rulers in Nigeria, not present class of rulers. In other words, unless there is a change of government, a change of regime that is not ideologically bankrupt, there is not politically corrupt, Boko Haram will remain a source of gold mine. It is a gold mine for leaders who have enough. For example, the Borno State governor, today, Borno State has largest security vote in the whole country. And if Boko Haram goes today, the security vote will go.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yes, so we must look at it at that point.
We thank you, Doctor.
Yeah.
Because if we allow you, Doctor, you give us a whole nice thesis.
So let's just, yes.
Dr. Prince Charles Dixon, will you make a response, or do we take further questions before we round up?
Let me quickly chip in, and thank you so very much, Dr. Wanko. I'll say this: the historical framework of that axis is as complex as it sounds. And let me say this: it's like when we have conversations around. Let me sound controversial. When we have conversation around Christian unity, and I ask people, what is a united Christian in the Nigerian conversation? Doctor, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm sure he's hearing you.
Yes. When you look at somewhere in the southeast, when there are stratifications. So, for example, Lomba in a Ebonyi state, it has to be an Assemblies of God person, whether you like it or not. And then what are the chances that a Catholic man will take Abia State? Very, very slim. I remember in one of your forums, we were discussing how Peter Obi brought in Catholic versus Anglican. You see, that dynamics, for most people southward, it seems fixated in Islam, Muslim, but it doesn't work that way. Like you were like when you said Kanuri, for example, Kanuri is just almost generic. Kanuri, you will talk about the Yewa Kanuri, you will talk about the Kari Kanuri, you talk about Lere, you talk about Ngeze, you talk about Maaka, you talk about Kari, you talk about Bade, you talk about Yewa. I mean, it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot. I remember asking someone on my way to Maiduguri. I said, what do they speak in Maiduguri, in Borno State? He said they speak Hausa. I said, what else? He said, oh, they all speak Hausa. No. Like you rightly pointed out, we're talking about inter-conflict with so much interest. Now, I'm stuttering. I wish I didn't have to believe you, and I wish I was with the SSS. I will arrest you because you indirectly call for a coup. but the truth be said, there has to be an overhaul of the current system, of the entire current system, when I say the entire current system, because on one hand, there's a bunch of fellows who don't understand. On the other hand, those who understand are profiteering from it and do not want to do anything about it and will not do anything about it. There are conversations that some of us, when we put in public spaces because we know, only generate more heated conversations. Like you rightly pointed out, and we'll take more questions. I think I still have more time. Somebody asked this question, and I asked this question, and I put it across, and I was shushed. There are local governments currently that are under Boko Haram, and yet they get subvention.
Yes.
And nobody has access to those local governments. Who wants to have this conversation? If we don't have this conversation, then there's a whole lot more. And this is the truth of the matter. This is the truth of the matter. I know very well. Hello, am I there?
Yeah.
I know very well. I don't know if we have audience in Maiduguri, but for what's happened in the last 24 hours, there's a lot of celebration in Maiduguri over the death of the brand Shekau. There's a lot of celebration. But the question is, how does the military high command cash in? They can't cash in because there's a section of that military high command that is in a conversation with the Al-Qaeda arm, all the way coming from the Algerian Moroccan axis. If you look at the markets, the IDP camp you were talking about, it has. I remember when there were conversations around having to let it, close it. I can't remember those who were against it. It has become a market on its own.
Yes.
A big market on its own. And Enomba, do you know that there is, oh God, there is, I'm not emotional. I'm almost dead emotional. There is a big market that supply children from the IDP camp, and there's a southern market for it.
You know, my brother, people interrupted me. You know, I told you I will ask you about the IDP camp, but I haven't got into that. I think I will have to create another program, please, for us to discuss IDP, but go on.
You know, so you begin to ask yourself, have we sold our conscience to that point? But I like to use that phrase, and please, Doctor, can I take copyright to that? There needs to be a counter-insurgency to fight the insurgency by a new crop of people. And until we do that, we'll probably be dancing around it's no longer a keg of gunpowder. It's gone beyond that. Because what we have has become institutionalized. If, Elomba, you don't stay in Nigeria, and for our audience who stay in Maiduguri, if you go to Maiduguri town, Maiduguri proper, and they told you that this insurgency is happening in Maiduguri, you would doubt it. You would doubt it.
Oh. Can we take question from Raymond Unebu, please? Can you unmute yourself?
Thank you, my brother. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Very happy that I have learned a lot this evening. But my question is now, we as Nigerians, how do we feel after listening to you that we are a member of a country that cannot even defend the military men? According to you, some of the military men were killed and buried in mass grave. That one is one question. Number two is it true that some of Boko Haram members are now in Nigerian military force? And then the last question goes this way. Now that the head of Boko Haram have been killed, is there any more hope for the rescue of people that are being kidnapped by the Boko Haram? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. Let me start from the last question. There is no hope that anybody will be released. I'm a harbinger of bad news when it comes to that, and my apologies. There is no such thing. Until we do what's right, that won't happen. Sadly, the official and the real death of Shekau is a blip. Now, if you do understand the workings of insurgency, and as it has happened in Borno over the past years, you would find out that what we've also created are micro, and let me put it in this perspective. I don't know how many of us listen to, if you had Doctor correctly, let me reemphasize. There are large interests. If you look at Borno as a state, I like to say this first and foremost. For some of us, maybe for another program, we probably would have some of us explain the politics of the creation of Yobe states from Borno states. That in itself helps us understand this large spectrum of conflicts. Having said that, your next question is protecting soldiers. Maybe I should answer that question by saying, sadly and painfully, let's leave the foot soldiers. Let's leave the rank and foolish. Do you know that we've lost approximately 17 officers upwards? From captain, major, upwards, 17. Where does that happen if not in Nigeria? And out of that sad figure, one of the things that hurt a few of us is that a sizable amount of these are through ambush. Now that should spin a question in your mind. Why ambush? Why are Nigerian soldiers ambushed? I won't answer that. To the other question you asked, and this is me being very frank and truthful. I know we are very emotional people. I know we get upset. Sometimes it hurts us. There are Boko Haram sympathizers in the Nigerian military. I say that without any equivocal doubt. I know a couple of them. But that Boko Haram repentant or non-repentant or de-radicalized were put in the army, that didn't happen. That has never happened. I know we are terrible. I know we make all kinds of mistakes. I know we do all kinds of propaganda. That has, and this is where the truth lies. You don't even need them. You don't need them. I don't know. I don't know why one of our listeners had to spill that. But I mean, what is there to hide? In some places in Borno, our soldiers run. Our soldiers run away. Nobody wants to die because they are underarmed. Apart from being underfunded, no, they don't have the equipment. So the question of recruiting a typical Boko Haram soldier will not leave Boko Haram to join the Nigerian army. Elumba, he won't.
Because he's better off with Boko Haram.
Yes, because he's better off. Equipment-wise, fund-wise.
That is terrible. Let's take 3 questions at a go so that we'll be rounding up, please. And then if you're able to take note of them. Sunday Otaha, please. Sunday Otaha, please. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you, sir. Yeah, I have 2 questions. Yeah, but before I ask, I sincerely want to appreciate Dr. Prince Charles Dixon and Olumba Television. Thank you very much for a work well done for the betterment of Nigeria. My questions are, sir, I want to ask, I keep on asking, what was really the agitation of Boko Haram? As in, what is their demand, their primary demand? That is one of the questions. The second question is this, as in the Shakau's dead, as in, I think there's still something we need to look at in that, because Shakau was killed by ISWAP, or how do they, as in ISWAP, this one of the, I heard that is one of the breakout of Boko Haram, one of the fractions affiliated to ISIS. I see it as a signal, probably sending a message to the nation that there's still a force more stronger that can do what our army cannot even do. As in, that's the point I'm looking at it from. Don't you think so, sir?
Okay. Okay, I've jotted that down.
All right, we thank you. Let's take Odinga, please. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay, good evening.
Good evening. Situation.
Dr. Prince Charles Dixon, I am so excited I stayed awake to listen to this very interesting and educating information. It's quite sad hearing all of this narrative that you shared with us. I am even scared for you. I hope that tomorrow we'll not wake up and hear that you have been kidnapped or SSS has summoned you to their office. I hope it doesn't happen. Anyway, thank you so very much for your time. My first question was asked by Raymond, and you responded with an emphatic no, they will not be rescued for those who are still in captivity. And you added that until we do the right thing, they will never be rescued. Now, my question is, what is that? What exactly is that right thing that we need to do as a nation for the remaining victims who are in captivity will be released? Question number two. It's quite sad that sons and husbands in uniforms have lost their life in the fight to protect Nigerians, and the authorities above are not saying anything about it. At what point is this whole chaos in the army, or is the army going to accept the fact that there are soldiers who are dying, and these soldiers have names, these soldiers have parents, these soldiers have families, they have wives, they have children. At what point is the army authority going to accept the fact that these people are dying and they're dying in their numbers, and also give Nigerians the right figure of the people who have died? And also by way of informing their parents, their loved ones, their families, so that they will have closure and know that their children died in the fight for the soul of Nigeria. Thank you.
Yeah.
We thank you. Doctor, let's take these two questions before we take the rest and then round up.
Sure.
Please.
Okay, we'll take these questions, right?
Yeah. Let's consider the ones that we've asked already so that we don't get, because they are very, very germane.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you very much, Odinga and Sunday Otawa. I think those are your names. I saw that. Let me start from Odinga. Ladies first. My apologies. If I was talking to a colleague yesterday at the Washington Post, I remember, yes, and we had a good belly laugh after talking about everything Nigerian and some other things. And this is where we had to shake our heads. And this is me answering the question. Odinga, you said, at what point would the Nigerian leadership tell the parents of these soldiers? At what point will they own up and give us figures and all that? I think that sums up your question. You feel pretty sad. Now, let me answer that question by bringing us up to speed on something that should sadden us if we call ourselves patriots. So the Nigerian military spokesperson on Monday on Wednesday, if I recall very well, said that I'm borrowing his words. He said that the army is looking carefully. Alomba says army is looking carefully into the deaths of Shekau. Now, you don't even need the expert like myself. You could just do a Google and see the same army showing us the dead body of Shekau. Then you ask yourself, which army? Is it that the army suddenly has a short fuse memory to have forgotten what it said? And I listened to him say that in the past, they've actually reported that he's dead, and then he comes back. You see, that now answers your question, how embarrassing it is. They didn't say we come back. They actually said Shekau comes back. So that puts a fusion of the Shekau is killed. The army says he has been killed. Then Shekau comes to embarrass us by saying, here I am, Superman. I'm not gonna die. I can't die. I haven't died. That tells you how ridiculous and where we are sitting. So if Shekau dies multiple times and is not dead, put that in perspective of what happens to the Nigerian soldiers where there is no even record. Now, I can tell you this. One of the reasons why we're where we are again is you can't run away from history, whether in the long term or the short term. If you're a military historian on this page, you might want to engage me on how were our military formations formed in the first place. You might want to look at the first military intervention in Borno State, Operation Flush. Operation Flush basically was extrajudicial killings, whether you like it or not. There was a poor understanding and you just went in there and people were being killed. I tell you, as an onlooker this time around, it's similar to what's happening in the Southeast. You just lump in there and you're killing whoever comes around. So you're repeating the same thing. And when the bubble does burst, you will get another Boko Haram. Now, Sunday, you asked a question which is also a fallout of what Odinga is talking about, and which was a question Elomba asked. Boko Haram has built so much base. You might call it political goodwill in its base. You might not be far from it. And that's the truth. I asked an insider when we spoke, and it was a very simple and direct question. Where did Boko Haram get funds to share to communities it had captured only recently? Where did he get that money? And do you honestly think that people in some of those places actually want to be liberated? Or liberated, as it were. Now, Sunday, some of the things that are not necessarily public knowledge that we can't put in public spaces are some of the things we share with higher authorities. But when we've discovered that we need indeed a counterinsurgency to deal with the insurgency because you don't even know who you're talking to, we just keep mute. The death of Shekau is not a blessing. No, it's not. If you look at it holistically, it's like taking away a command chain, and then you have, because as it is, there's a part of this conversation, Elumba, we didn't even talk about. We didn't talk about the splinter groups from Boko Haram itself, the splinter groups in Niger State, the splinter group in Bauchi, the splinter group in bushes in Kaduna. We didn't talk about Ansar. We didn't talk about them. So if you've killed Shekau, what happens to these groups? The groups that are working in the forests of Kaduna are working independently of Boko Haram. And that's something that should scare any of us.
No. There's a question I'm afraid to ask, but I will still ask it. What you've just said about the Boko Haram in Niger State and Kaduna, is there a Boko Haram splinter group in Southwest and Southeast Nigeria?
No, there's not.
Or is there a possibility that it will emerge?
There is a possibility.
But right now we don't have.
No, we don't have. And let me answer that furthermore, in answering that question. Sunday, you had talked about ISWAP. It's quick to think that ISWAP and Boko Haram are different and same. But you see, ISWAP itself was also a splinter group from the Shekau group about 4 or 5 years ago. don't forget that only 3 years ago, Boko Haram itself was having an internal wrangling themselves. Even recently, more recently, our sources spoke of new wranglings within the command chain.
La 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 la.